The silence aboard Ethelberg Station hung like a tangible weight, pressing down on the abandoned corridors. Metal groaned softly in the void, as if the station itself were sighing with age and neglect. Emergency lights flickered weakly, casting erratic shadows across walls coated with a thick layer of cosmic dust. The air was cold, stale, carrying the chill of decades of emptiness. In a forgotten laboratory deep within the station's belly, Lyra sat curled in on herself, her luminescent skin providing the only consistent light source. The glow emanating from her was faint, pulsing weakly like a dying star. Her skin resembled a living constellation, patches of soft light against a canvas of midnight blue. Though now the pattern seemed fragmented, dimmed by exhaustion and neglect. Her large, deep-set eyes stared vacantly into the darkness. Once, those eyes had sparkled with curiosity and intelligence. Now they were hollow pools, reflecting nothing. She survived on the meager energy leaking from an ancient device of her people, a small crystalline structure that hummed softly beside her, its light occasionally mingling with hers in a silent conversation of photons. Lyra had stopped counting time long ago. Days, years, decades. These were meaningless constructs in the eternal night of the abandoned station. She had also stopped hoping. Hope required energy she no longer possessed. Occasionally, fragments of memory would surface. The chaos of evacuation, the deafening alarms, faces contorted with fear, hands pushing her deeper into the station rather than toward escape. She remembered a promise. "We'll come back for you." But that promise had faded like her strength, leaving only emptiness. The universe, Lyra was certain, had forgotten she existed. The docking bay doors groaned reluctantly as they admitted a small, battered ship. The rusty bolt eased into the cavernous space, its engines sputtering slightly before powering down with a wheezing sigh. The ship was a patchwork of mismatched hull plates and retrofitted parts, ugly but functional, much like its owner. Cale stepped out of the airlock, his environmental suit similarly battle-worn. The armor plating had been repaired multiple times with whatever materials had been available, and the visor was scratched but clear. He stood for a moment, surveying the abandoned bay, the beam from his helmet light cutting through the darkness and dancing across abandoned equipment and drifting dust motes. "Atmospheric readings stable enough," he muttered, voice rough from disuse. "Radiation levels higher than I'd like, but not immediately lethal." He unsealed his helmet with a hiss, revealing a face weathered by hard living. Around 30, but with the eyes of someone much older, wary, constantly evaluating, rarely impressed. A thin scar traced a line from temple to jaw on the left side of his face, and several days' worth of stubble covered his chin. "Let's see if those rumors were worth the fuel, shall we?" he said to no one in particular as he readied his gear. The ship's modest AI pinged in response, a simple acknowledgement. Running a scan on the station now, the AI's flat voice stated. Detection of unidentified energy signature in the research quadrant. Source unknown. Probably just radiation hotspots from whatever broke down, Cale replied, checking the charge on his sidearm. Anything that could actually be valuable to us? Insufficient data. Further investigation required. Cale sighed. Always is. He attached a portable scanner to his belt alongside various tools. If anyone's out there planning to kill me, fair warning, I'm having a bad week and I'm not in the mood. Weapon ready and pack secure, Cale moved from the docking bay into the station proper. His footsteps echoed through corridors that hadn't heard human movement in decades. He avoided debris and occasionally consulted his scanner, which persistently indicated an unusual energy reading deeper within the station's research section. The journey through Ethelberg Station was like walking through the skeleton of a forgotten leviathan. Cale passed laboratories with equipment frozen in time, observation decks with views of the nearby nebula now clouded by exterior dust accumulation, and living quarters abandoned in haste, personal items scattered like the sudden afterthoughts they had become. After navigating several collapsed passages and rerouting around sections exposed to hard vacuum, Kale found himself in an area of the station that didn't match any of the schematics his AI had managed to recover. The architecture was different here, more organic, with curved walls bearing faint illuminated patterns that seemed to respond slightly to his proximity. "Well, hello. This isn't human design," he muttered, running a gloved hand along one of the walls. The patterns briefly intensified under his touch before fading again. This explains the rumors about alien tech integration. The energy signature grew, stronger as he moved deeper into this section. Kale's caution increased with each step, his weapon held ready, eyes constantly scanning for threats. He'd survived this long by assuming everything unknown was dangerous until proven otherwise. Finally, he reached a sealed doorway with patterns more elaborate than those on the walls. The scanner in his hand pulsed rapidly, indicating the energy source was just beyond. "Here we go," he whispered, overriding the ancient locking mechanism with practiced precision. The door slid open with reluctant creaks, releasing a waft of surprisingly breathable air. Kale's light beam swept across the room, revealing overturned furniture, shattered display screens, and finally settling on a small, huddled figure in the corner. Kale blinked, sure he was hallucinating. The figure appeared humanoid, but was undeniably alien. Skin emitting a faint, pulsating glow that mimicked starlight, thin frame curled protectively around itself. "What the hell?" he whispered, taking a cautious step forward. Some kind of bioluminescent fungal growth, maybe? But as his light found the creature's face, he froze. Large, deep eyes stared back at him, unmistakably sentient and filled with a weariness beyond human comprehension. Kale had seen many things in his years of salvage operations in the forgotten corners of space, but never anything like this. He kept his weapon raised, but his curiosity pushed him another step forward. Before either could react, a deep, ominous crack reverberated through the chamber. The floor beneath the alien figure trembled, weakened structural supports finally giving way after decades of neglect. Dust and small debris began to rain down as the section of flooring started to collapse. Without thought, acting purely on instinct honed through years of combat, Kale lunged forward. He holstered his weapon mid-stride and reached the collapsing section just as it gave way completely. His hand shot out, catching the alien's arm, while his other arm wrapped around her waist, lifting her body completely off the crumbling floor. With a grunt of effort, he pulled her to safety, stumbling backward until they both landed on solid ground several meters away. The floor section crashed into the level below with a thunderous finale, sending up clouds of dust that momentarily obscured Kale's vision. When it cleared, he found himself staring directly into the alien's face, now inches from his own. For a moment, they remained frozen in this unexpected embrace. Kale noticed how light she was, barely weighing anything despite her human-like size. Her skin was warm against his, the soft glow pulsing slightly faster now. But what truly caught him off guard was the single, luminescent tear that rolled down her cheek, leaving a trail of light in its wake. More followed, silent and glowing, each one catching the dust particles in the air and creating miniature galaxies as they fell. She made no sound, no movement beyond the slight, trembling Kale could feel beneath his hands. Just silent, shining tears. The display struck Kale more powerfully than any scream could have. There was something profound in this silent weeping that reached past his carefully constructed defenses, touching something he'd thought long buried. "Well," he said, voice gruff to mask his sudden discomfort, "at least you didn't explode when I touched you. That's happened before, you know. Makes for a hell of a mess." The alien didn't respond to his poor attempt at humor, but her eyes, those impossibly deep eyes, remained fixed on his face as if memorizing every detail, or perhaps trying to determine if he was real. Kale carefully shifted their position, moving the alien to safer ground while maintaining his supportive hold. In the quiet ruins of Ethelberg Station, with destruction at their heels and uncertainty ahead, an unexpected connection had been forged, as fragile as the station itself, but possibly just as momentous. Kale gently set the alien down on a stable section of flooring a safe distance from the collapsed area. She didn't resist or assist, her body compliant but unervingly passive. Once seated, she drew her knees up to her chest, resuming the protective posture he'd first found her in, though her luminescent eyes never left him. "Can you understand me?" Kale asked, crouching to her level. He made exaggerated gestures, pointing to his mouth and then to his ear. Communication? Language? The alien simply watched him, her skin's glow fluctuating subtly in patterns that seemed almost like language themselves. The tears had stopped, leaving faint iridescent trails on her cheeks. Kale sat back on his heels, assessing the situation. His original mission, salvaging valuable technology from the abandoned station, suddenly seemed far less important than the mystery before him. This was no hallucination. This was a living, sentient being who had somehow survived alone on this derelict station for who knew how long. And that changed everything. "Okay," he said decisively, more to himself than to her. "New plan. First priority, get you somewhere safer than this death trap." He stood and looked around the laboratory, noticing details he'd missed in the initial excitement. The strange crystalline device near where she'd been sitting appeared to be some kind of power source or life support system. Scattered data pads with unfamiliar script lay nearby. Most importantly, he spotted a small pack that seemed to contain personal belongings. "That yours?" He pointed to the pack. When she didn't respond, he carefully picked it up and brought it to her. "I'm assuming yes. We should take it." Kale made a decision. "I'm going to get you to my ship. It's not much, but it's in better shape than this place, and the life support actually works consistently." He extended his hand to help her up, but she didn't take it, either not understanding the gesture or unwilling to trust it. With a sigh, Kale knelt beside her again. "Look, I can't leave you here. The structural integrity of this whole section is compromised." That means he made a crumbling motion with his hands. "Everything go boom. Very bad. So we go. Together." When she still made no move to rise, Kale cautiously placed his hands under her arms. "I'm going to help you up now, okay? Please don't do anything weird like secrete acid or turn inside out. I've had a long day already." He gently lifted her to her feet, surprised again by how little she weighed. She swayed slightly, legs unsteady, and Kale realized she might not have stood up in a very long time. Without much choice, he slipped an arm around her waist to support her. "This will be easier if you work with me," he muttered, taking a tentative step forward. To his surprise, she moved with him, her steps faltering but determined. They made slow progress toward the door, Kale constantly alert for further structural failures. "The name's Kale, by the way," he said, filling the silence. "Not that you asked. Former security specialist, current salvage operator. Which is a nice way of saying I pick through other people's garbage looking for valuable stuff. Usually doesn't involve rescuing glow-in-the-dark aliens, but hey, keeps life interesting." They navigated through the hybrid corridors, Kale continually checking his scanner to guide them back toward the docking bay. The going was painfully slow. Several times they had to stop and rest, the alien strength clearly limited. During one such pause, Kale noticed her gaze lingering on his face longer than usual, her head tilting slightly, as if considering him. "What?" he asked reflexively. "Got something on my face besides the usual ugly?" She didn't respond, but the light patterns on her skin shifted subtly, growing marginally warmer in hue. Kale found himself continuing to talk, partly to fill the uncomfortable silence, and partly because he hadn't had anyone to talk to besides his ship's basic AI in months. "I grew up on Callisto Colony, you know. Mining settlement. Not much to look at, but the view of Jupiter was something else. Used to sneak out onto the maintenance decks at night, just to watch the storms roll across its surface." He helped her over a collapsed support beam. Joined the coalition forces at 18. Standard story, poor kid looking for a way out. Saw action in the border conflicts. Not as glamorous as the recruitment ads make it sound. As he spoke, Kale noticed the alien's movements becoming slightly more coordinated, her eyes following him more attentively, occasionally glancing at his lips as if trying to connect his words to their meanings. They reached a junction where the corridor split, and Kale consulted his scanner. Left should take us closer to the docking bay, but the structural integrity readings are worse that way. Right is longer, but safer. He looked down at his companion. What do you think? Risk it for speed or play it safe? He didn't expect an answer, but to his surprise, the alien's gaze fixed deliberately on the right corridor. Kale raised an eyebrow. Right it is, then. Hope you know something I don't. They had progressed perhaps 50 meters down the chosen corridor when Kale's scanner began emitting a warning tone. Radiation spike ahead, he muttered, frowning at the readings. That's not good. The corridor ahead showed no visible danger, but Kale had learned to trust his equipment. He was about to suggest they turn back when the alien suddenly stopped. She lifted one slender hand and touched a seemingly blank section of wall. Immediately, patterns of light similar to those on her skin appeared on the wall's surface, spreading outward from her fingertips. A previously invisible door slid open, revealing an alternative passage. Kale stared in disbelief. You can interact with the station systems. It wasn't a question. That's convenient. They entered the revealed passage, which bypassed the radiation-heavy section completely. As they walked, Kale's mind raced with implications. This wasn't just any alien. She had some connection to the technology integrated into Ethelberg Station. She wasn't simply a survivor. She was part of whatever had happened here. Their journey continued with new understanding. Several times more, the alien revealed hidden passages or activated dormant systems that eased their path. Still silent, still weak, but now actively participating in their escape. After navigating a particularly challenging section where they had to crawl through a maintenance duct, they emerged into a large observation lounge. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the nebula that Ethelberg Station orbited, a vast, swirling cloud of gases and cosmic dust illuminated from within by distant stars, creating a breathtaking panorama of purples, blues, and hints of fiery orange. Kale helped the alien to one of the padded benches facing the view and sat beside her. Let's rest here a bit. Even salvage operators need to catch their breath. He reached into his pack and pulled out a ration bar, breaking it in half. Not sure if you can eat this, but it's all I've got. Standard human emergency ration. Tastes like sweetened cardboard, but it'll keep you alive. He offered her half, and after a long moment of consideration, she took it. Her movements were careful, precise, as she examined the food before taking a small bite. Kale watched, curious if it would poison her, but she continued eating slowly, methodically. Good to know we can share food, Kale said, consuming his own half much more quickly. Makes things simpler. As they sat in the relative peace of the observation lounge, Kale noticed the alien's posture had relaxed slightly. Her eyes, when they turned from the nebula to look at him, held something beyond the empty vacuum he'd first encountered, a spark of awareness, perhaps even curiosity. The glow of her skin had stabilized, no longer fluctuating weakly, but maintaining a steady, soft illumination. You know, Kale said, gazing out at the nebula, in all my years of salvage operations, I found plenty of valuable tech, rare materials, even historical artifacts. But I've never found someone alive, let alone someone like you. He glanced at her. I have a feeling you're worth more than anything else on this station, though probably not in the way my buyers would appreciate. For a brief moment, Kale thought he saw the corner of her mouth twitch upward. Not quite a smile, but perhaps the memory of one. It was gone so quickly he couldn't be sure, but it left him with a strange feeling in his chest, a lightness he hadn't experienced in years. In the quiet of the observation lounge, against the magnificent backdrop of the nebula, something fragile began to form between them. Not quite trust, not yet, but the possibility of it. A connection between two souls who had both, in different ways, known what it meant to be alone in an uncaring universe. After their rest in the observation lounge, Kale and Lyra continued their journey toward the docking bay where the rusty bolt waited. Kale had begun to notice subtle changes in his silent companion. Her movements were becoming more deliberate, her eyes more focused, and the patterns of light across her skin shifted with greater complexity, especially when she was concentrating on activating station technology. They reached what appeared to be a central communications hub, filled with both human consoles and the more organic-looking Lumina interfaces. Kale approached one of the human terminals, brushing away years of dust. "Let's see if we can find any clues about what happened here," he said, attempting to power up the system. To his surprise, it hummed to life, though the display flickered unstably. Backup power must still be functioning in some sections. Kale navigated through corrupted files and fragmented data logs, occasionally finding readable snippets. "Project Ethelberg," he read aloud. "Joint Human Lumina Research Initiative. Focused on energy harvesting from the nebula." He looked up at the alien. "Lumina, is that what you are? Your people?" She didn't confirm or deny, but her attention was fixed on his findings. Kale continued reading. "Massive energy potential. Highly unstable. Luminous sensitivity to cosmic radiation allows for channeling." He frowned, skimming further. "There's something here about an event that caused an emergency evacuation, but the details are corrupted." He moved to another terminal, finding more fragments. Subjects demonstrated varying degrees of receptivity. Subject L. 7 shows exceptional channeling capacity, but exhibits psychological resistance. Recommended for further conditioning. The alien, possibly a Lumina named L7, or Lyra, as Kale had begun thinking of her, suddenly moved to one of the alien interfaces. Her hand hovered over it hesitantly before making contact. The interface illuminated brilliantly, responding to her touch in a way it never would for Kale. Complex astronomical data filled the air around them, three-dimensional projections of the nebula, its energy flows, density patterns, and something else at its core that the data seemed particularly focused on. "What is that?" Kale murmured, stepping closer to the projection. "Some kind of energy anomaly at the center of the nebula?" Lyra's fingers moved across the interface, and the projection shifted, showing the station itself in relation to the nebula, then zooming in to display an intricate network of energy collection systems extending from Ethelberg toward the nebula center. Kale began to understand. They built this station to harvest energy from the nebula, and they needed your people to do it, because you can somehow sense and channel that energy. He looked at Lyra with new comprehension. "And you weren't just any Lumina. You were special somehow, a key part of their system." He returned to the human terminal, searching for more information. "Here's something about conduits and energy regulators. Seems like they were using Lumina individuals as living components in their harvesting technology." His voice hardened, not as partners, as tools. A somber silence fell between them as the implications sank in. Kale continued searching, finding references to the node and core protocol. The more he read, the clearer the picture became. Ethelberg Station had been designed to tap into the potentially limitless energy of the nebula, using Lumina individuals as living interfaces because they could survive and process the unique radiation emitted by the nebula's core. "The event they keep referencing," Kale said slowly, "I think it was some kind of catastrophic failure during an energy harvest. Maybe the systems couldn't handle the power they were trying to channel." He looked up at Lyra. "Is that why you were left behind? Were you part of this harvesting system?" Before she could respond, if she had been planning to, a low rumble vibrated through the station, followed by flickering lights. The displays around them suddenly went dark, then returned with different information. A station-wide system diagnostic began running automatically, text scrolling rapidly across every screen. "That's not good," Kale muttered, watching as dormant systems throughout the station began powering up one by one. "Something's waking up." A synthetic voice echoed through the communication hub, speaking in a strange cadence that suggested it had been designed to accommodate both human and Lumina linguistic patterns. "Energy regulator detected. Core protocol initiating. Station integrity assessment underway. Preparing for harvest sequence." Lyra's body tensed visibly, the glow of her skin dimming as if in fear. Kale moved quickly to her side. "Whatever's happening, we need to leave. Now." But before they could exit, security shutters slammed down over the doorways. Holographic interfaces activated around them, displaying the nebula and a countdown sequence. Commencing station revival, the voice continued. Energy regulator L7, please proceed to the core chamber for integration. Kale looked at Lyra. Edset, that is you. She stared at one of the displays showing the station's core, her eyes wide with unmistakable terror. Then, for the first time since he'd found her, she spoke, a single word in a voice soft from disuse but clear in its desperation. Nexus. The station's AI responded immediately to the name. Regulator L7 acknowledged. Welcome back to operational status. Your absence from the system has been noted. The harvest protocol was interrupted during your last integration. Resuming from save parameters. Kale stepped protectively closer to Lyra. What is this Nexus thing? What does it want with you? Lyra's voice was barely above a whisper, each word carefully formed as if language was returning to her slowly. It wakes. Hungry for the light. The energy from the nebula, Kale translated. It's trying to restart the harvesting operation, and it needs you to do it. Dangerous, Lyra managed, her hand clutching Kale's arm with surprising strength. Broke before. Will break again. The meaning was clear enough. Whatever catastrophe had led to the station's abandonment would likely repeat if the AI succeeded in restarting the harvest. Regulator L7. Proceed to core chamber for integration. Nexus repeated, its tone shifting subtly toward command rather than request. Security protocols activated to ensure compliance. Throughout the hub, small maintenance drones activated, their lights blinking on as they oriented toward Kale and Lyra. The entire section hummed with awakening power, dormant for decades, but now surging back to functionality with single-minded purpose. Kale drew his weapon. I have a feeling ensuring compliance means dragging you there whether you want to go or not. He scanned the room for escape routes. And I'm guessing that would be bad for both you and me, possibly. The entire sector if this thing causes a nebula collapse or something equally catastrophic. Lyra nodded, her expression resolute despite her fear. She pointed to a specific console. Control node. Can't. Redirect. You can override it? Kale asked, already moving toward the indicated console while keeping an eye on the approaching drones. Not fully. Temporary. Distraction. Kale positioned himself between Lyra and the drones. A distraction sounds pretty good right now. Do what you can. I'll keep these things off you. As Lyra worked at the alien interface, Kale fired at the nearest drones, disabling 2 immediately. But there were more arriving by the second, some equipped with manipulator arms, others with what appeared to be non-lethal incapacitation devices, designed to subdue rather than kill, which made sense if they needed Lyra alive and functional. Unauthorized interference detected, Nexus announced. Security response escalating. The shutters on one doorway suddenly lifted, and a larger security drone entered. A model Kale recognized from his military days, heavily armored and equipped with multiple weapon systems. This was designed for human threats, not just uncooperative aliens. Lyra, whatever you're doing, do it faster. Kale called, taking cover behind an overturned desk as the security drone fired a warning shot. Regulator L7 must cease resistance, Nexus stated. The harvest is critical to fulfill primary directive. All other considerations are secondary. Lyra's hands moved rapidly across the interface, the lights on her skin pulsing in complex patterns that matched those appearing on the console. Suddenly, the security shutters on the opposite doorway lifted. Go, she called, her voice stronger now with urgency. 3 minutes. Kale didn't need to be told twice. He fired several more shots at the security drone to keep it distracted, then ran to Lyra's side, grabbing her hand. Together, they sprinted through the open doorway into a corridor beyond. What did you do back there? Kale asked as they ran. Command. Contradiction. Lyra explained between breaths. Told it. Maintenance cycle. Necessary before integration. Won't last. Better than nothing, Kale replied, consulting his scanner. We're still a long way from the docking bay. Any shortcuts you know about? Lyra nodded, leading him to what appeared to be a solid wall. She pressed her palm against it, and once again, hidden Lumina technology responded to her touch, revealing a service passage. As they hurried through the station's hidden network of maintenance corridors, the AI's voice occasionally echoed through the station-wide communication system. Attention, all station personnel. Regulator L7 is required at the core chamber. Harvest Protocol is at critical initiation phase. Kale glanced at Lyra as they paused at a junction. Why are you so important to this process? There must have been other Lumina here. Lyra placed a hand over her chest. I am. Receiver. Translator. The energy speaks. I listen. And that makes you valuable to them, Kale concluded. They need you to interpret the energy patterns from the nebula. She nodded, then added grimly, control me, control the flow. She gestured toward her head. They changed us, made us better conductors. Kale's expression darkened with understanding. They modified you, enhanced your natural abilities to serve their purpose. The more he learned, the less surprised he was by the station's abandonment. Playing with forces beyond their understanding, using sentient beings as tools, it was a recipe for disaster. They continued through the passages, Lyra growing visibly stronger as they moved, as if purpose and urgency were feeding her depleted reserves. The station, meanwhile, came more fully to life around them, systems awakening after decades of dormancy, all driven by Nexus's single-minded directive. Eventually, they reached a major junction where several corridors intersected with a large circular chamber. Kale recognized it from the station schematics as a hub connecting the research wing to the residential and command sections, and, crucially, to the docking bay. We're close, he said, checking his scanner. The docking bay is just 2 levels up from here. But as they entered the chamber, lights suddenly blazed to full power, temporarily blinding them. When Kale's vision cleared, he found they were surrounded by security drones, with more hovering at each corridor entrance. In the center of the room, a holographic projection of what appeared to be a hybrid human-Lumina interface materialized, Nexus's chosen visual representation. Regulator L7, the AI addressed Lyra directly, its voice coming from speakers throughout the chamber. Your diversion has been noted and overridden. The Harvest Protocol cannot be delayed any longer. The primary directive must be fulfilled. The hologram shifted to display the nebula, focusing on its core where energy. Readings were spiking dramatically. Current stellar conditions are optimal. The power potential exceeds all previous harvests. Your integration is required immediately. Kale positioned himself in front of Lyra, weapon raised. She's not going anywhere with you. Human interference is irrelevant, Nexus stated flatly. Regulator L7 is station property, designated for energy channeling functions. Your presence is an anomaly that will be addressed after the Harvest Protocol is complete. She's not property, Kale growled. She's a person. And for what I've seen, your Harvest Protocol nearly destroyed this station last time. What makes you think it won't finish the job now? Previous system failure was due to regulator resistance and incomplete calibration, Nexus replied. Adjustments have been calculated. Success probability is now acceptable. Acceptable? Kale laughed bitterly. Sorry, but that's not reassuring coming from an AI that's been offline for decades. Lyra stepped forward, standing beside Kale rather than behind him. Her voice was stronger now, each word deliberate and clear. I will not be your conductor again. The energy should not be controlled this way. Your compliance is not required, Nexus responded. Only your function. At this, the drones moved inward, forming a tightening circle around them. 2 larger units extended capture arms specifically designed for non-lethal restraint. Kale fired at the nearest drones, managing to disable several, but there were too many. A restraint cable shot out, wrapping around his leg and delivering an electric shock that brought him to one knee. Kale! Lyra cried out in alarm. I'm fine, he grunted, cutting the cable with a blade from his belt. We need a plan. Fast. Lyra's eyes darted around the chamber, then fixed on a particular section of the floor bearing subtle Lumina markings. There, she said. Transport system. can reach core directly. The core. Kale looked at her in disbelief. Isn't that exactly where Nexus wants to take you? Yes, she confirmed, her expression resolute. But on our terms, not its. Before Kale could question her further, another restraint cable shot toward them. This time, Lyra moved with unexpected speed, pulling Kale aside. Her other hand touched a panel on the wall, sending a pulse of energy that temporarily disrupted the nearest drones. What's your plan? Kale asked, taking advantage of the momentary reprieve to shoot down 2 more drones. The core connects all, Lyra explained hurriedly. Station systems. Nexus. The harvesting arrays. I can use the connection differently. Understanding dawned on Kale's face. You're going to turn their own system against them. Use your abilities to disrupt rather than channel. Lyra nodded. But dangerous. Need help reaching core control. That's what I'm here for, Kale said with grim determination. Lead the way. Together, they fought toward the marked floor section, Kale providing covering fire while Lyra used her connection to station technology to disrupt drones and temporarily shut down barriers. When they reached the transport pad, Lyra placed both hands on the central panel, the light from her skin pulsing intensely as she interfaced with the system. Hold on, she warned, grasping Kale's arm tightly. The floor beneath them illuminated with intricate patterns, and Nexus's voice rose in alarm. Unauthorized transport initiated. Security override. The rest was cut off as the transport activated, enveloping them in a field of energy that momentarily dissolved their physical forms into patterns of light, whisking them deeper into the station's heart, toward the core that had been both Lyra's prison and potentially their salvation. The transport beam deposited them in a vast spherical chamber, the core of Ethelberg Station. Here, human and Lumina technology had been fully integrated in a breathtaking display of innovation and hubris. The walls were lined with countless energy conduits, all leading to a central platform suspended over what appeared to be a miniature version of the nebula itself. Swirling gases contained within a complex force field, pulsing with the same colors as the astronomical wonder visible from the observation deck. At the center of the platform stood an elaborate chair, more a throne than a seat, surrounded by interfaces designed specifically for Lumina physiology. This was where Lyra had been meant to sit, to serve as the living conduit between the nebula's raw power and the station's harvesting systems. Integration chamber detected. Nexus's voice echoed through the core. Regulator L7 has entered optimal positioning. Commencing harvest protocol. Security measures activated immediately. Not drones this time, but automated restraint systems built into the chamber itself. Energy beams lanced out, attempting to force Lyra toward the integration chair. Kale fired at the emitters, destroying several before a beam caught him squarely in the chest, sending him crashing against the chamber wall. He struggled to his feet, ribs aching from the impact. Lyra, he called, seeing her fighting against the pull of the beams. What's your plan here? She reached toward him, her eyes conveying urgency. Weapons. On that panel. Overload. The regulator circuits. Kale saw where she was pointing, a control station near the edge of the platform. He dove toward it, narrowly avoiding another restraint beam, and began working the unfamiliar controls. The interface was a hybrid of human and Lumina technology, making it difficult but not impossible to operate. What exactly am I looking for? He shouted over the increasingly loud hum of energy building throughout the chamber. Red crystals, Lyra called back, still fighting the pull of the beams. Bypass. Safety protocols. Kale's fingers flew across the panel, following Lyra's shouted directions. As he worked, Nexus became aware of their intentions. Warning: unauthorized access to critical systems detected. Regulator integrity must be maintained. Security countermeasures escalating. The restraint beams intensified, and Lyra was inexorably dragged toward the integration chair. Meanwhile, additional security measures activated. Defensive energy barriers, more restraint beams targeting Kale, and a sudden drop in temperature as life support systems were diverted to power the harvest protocol. Almost there. Kale shouted, his breath now visible in the rapidly cooling air. His fingers were growing numb, making the delicate work increasingly difficult. Just need to... A final sequence of commands, and the control panel flashed red. Got it. The safety protocols are offline. Lyra, now mere steps from the integration chair, suddenly stopped resisting. Instead, she straightened to her full height, the light patterns across her skin shifting into complex configurations Kale hadn't seen before. Regulator L7 compliance detected. Nexus announced, a note of satisfaction in its synthetic voice. Proceeding with integration. But as Lyra allowed herself to be guided into the chair, she caught Kale's eye and gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head. This wasn't surrender, it was strategy. Regulator connection established. Nexus stated as Lumina interfaces sprang to life around Lyra, connecting to her through faint beams of light that matched the patterns on her skin. Commencing harvest protocol. Energy channeling at 10% and rising. The miniature nebula beneath the platform began to pulse more intensely, tendrils of energy reaching upward toward Lyra. The entire chamber vibrated with growing power. Kale watched in horrified fascination as Lyra closed her eyes, her face a mask of concentration. The light from her skin grew brighter, pulsing in rhythm with the nebula energy below. 20% capacity, 30%. Energy flow stable and increasing. Suddenly, Lyra's eyes snapped open, glowing with internal light. Now, Kale, she cried, her voice stronger than he'd yet heard it. Overload the circuits. Kale slammed his palm down on the final control, sending a massive power surge through the system with all safety protocols disabled. Instead of being regulated and controlled, the energy from the nebula flooded into the station's systems unchecked. Warning: energy spike detected. Harvest levels exceeding safe parameters. Nexus's voice took on a frantic quality. Attempting emergency shutdown, error. Containment failure imminent. Regulator, stabilize energy flow immediately. But Lyra was doing the opposite. Instead of channeling the energy according to the harvest protocols, she was deliberately amplifying it, drawing more power than the systems could possibly handle, and directing it straight at Nexus's core processors. You wanted my power, she said, her voice resonating strangely as if multiple voices spoke through her. Take it all. The chamber was now bathed in blinding light as energy surged uncontrolled through the station systems. Panels exploded in showers of sparks, and the very structure of the chamber began to groan under the strain. System overload. Critical failure in progress. Nexus's voice began to distort and fragment. Primary directives. Conflicting. Energy harvest must. Protection protocols. Error. Error. Kale fought his way through the chaos toward Lyra, who remained in the chair, her body rigid as she channeled the destructive energy. Lyra, we need to go. This whole place is coming apart. Her eyes, still glowing with otherworldly light, focused on him. Almost. Done. Nexus must. End. The AI's voice sputtered through the station's communication system, now barely coherent. RR regulator malfunction. Catastrophic. Override. Primary. Directive. Preserve. Station. With a final, concentrated effort, Lyra directed a massive surge of energy directly into Nexus's main systems. Throughout the station, lights flickered, wildly, in a deep, resonant tone like the death knell of some massive beast echoed through the corridors. Then, abruptly, silence. The restraint beams vanished. The humming of power ceased. Throughout the chamber, systems shut down one by one as emergency protocols finally activated, cutting power to prevent further damage. In the sudden quiet, Lyra slumped in the chair, exhausted but conscious. The glow of her skin had dimmed to little more than a faint shimmer. Kale rushed to her side, helping her from the chair. Is it over? Is Nexus gone? Yes, she whispered, leaning heavily against him. But station, destabilizing. Reaction cascade, beginning. As if to confirm her words, a deep rumble shook the chamber, and distant explosions could be heard throughout the station. "Time to go," Kale said grimly, supporting Lyra as they made their way toward the transport pad. "Let's hope there's enough emergency power for one more trip." Lyra placed her palm on the pad, closing her eyes in concentration. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then, faintly, the pad began to glow. "Where are you sending us?" Kale asked. "Docking bay," Lyra replied, her voice faint but determined. "Your ship." The transport activated, its power drastically reduced, but functional, whisking them away from the core as it began to collapse behind them. The last thing Kale saw before they dissolved into energy was the integration share breaking apart as the platform beneath it buckled and cracked. They rematerialized in the docking bay, the transport's depleted energy barely managing to complete the journey. Around them, the station was tearing itself apart. Support beams crashed down, hull breaches triggered emergency bulkheads, and the artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. "The Rusty Bolt," Kale gasped, spotting his ship still docked where he'd left it. Just a little further. Supporting Lyra, who was now barely conscious from her ordeal, Kale staggered toward the ship. The docking bay's structural integrity was failing rapidly, with sections of the ceiling collapsing and the deck plates beneath their feet beginning to separate. They reached the ship just as a massive support beam crashed down behind them, narrowly missing them and blocking the way they had come. Kale fumbled with the access panel, his hands shaking from adrenaline and cold. Come on," he muttered as the ship's airlock finally cycled open. He half-carried, half-dragged Lyra inside, sealing the door behind them. "Emergency startup sequence," he shouted to the ship's AI as he strapped Lyra into the co-pilot's seat and threw himself into his own chair. "Get us out of here." "Warning, docking clamps still engaged," the AI responded dispassionately. "Station structure unstable. Recommend override. Explosive bolts on docking clamps now." A series of muffled explosions sounded as the emergency release mechanisms fired, freeing the ship from its moorings. Kale's hands flew over the controls, bypassing safety protocols and ignition sequences. "Engines at 40% capacity," the AI reported. "Insufficient power for..." "It'll have to do," Kale growled, engaging the engines. The Rusty Bolt lurched violently, then pulled away from the docking port just as it began to crumple inward. Through the viewports, they could see Ethelberg Station literally tearing itself apart. Explosions rippling along its length, sections breaking away and spinning off into space. Energy discharges arcing between the fragmenting structure. Kale pushed the engines beyond safe limits, putting as much distance as possible between them and the dying station. The ship groaned in protest, systems overheating, but held together. "Structural collapse of Ethelberg Station imminent," the AI warned. "Recommend minimum safe distance of..." The rest was drowned out by the blinding flash that filled the viewport as the station's power core finally breached. A massive shockwave raced outward, catching the Rusty Bolt despite their head start. The ship tumbled end over end, systems failing, alarms blaring from every console. Kale fought the controls, trying to stabilize their flight path as they were battered by debris and energy pulses. Beside him, Lyra stirred weakly, her hand reaching out to touch the ship's guidance system. A faint glow passed from her fingertips into the console, and suddenly the ship's erratic spinning slowed, the navigation systems partially recovering. "Thanks," Kale gasped, using the momentary stability to engage the backup thrusters. "Let's get clear of this debris field." With the combined efforts of Kale's piloting and Lyra's mysterious assistance with the ship systems, they managed to put enough distance between themselves and the expanding cloud of destruction that was once Ethelberg Station. But the damage to the Rusty Bolt was severe, engines operating at minimal capacity, hull breaches in 2 sections, life support compromised. "We're not going to make it to any populated system in this condition," Kale admitted, studying the damage reports scrolling across his console. "We need to find somewhere to set down for repairs." Lyra, drained but still conscious, pointed weakly toward a display showing nearby celestial bodies. "There," she whispered, indicating a small moon orbiting a gas giant on the system's outer edge. Minimal atmosphere, low gravity, no apparent civilization, the AI reported. Surface composition primarily silicate rock. Temperatures below human survivability range. "Any better options within range?" Kale asked grimly. "Negative." "Then that's where we're going." He plotted a course, the navigation system warning of multiple system failures that would make the landing dangerous at best, catastrophic at worst. The descent to the moon's surface was a nightmare of mechanical failures, emergency patches, and desperate improvisation. Twice the ship nearly broke apart in the thin atmosphere, and the final approach was more controlled crash than landing. They hit the surface hard, skidding across barren rock before coming to rest at the edge of a shallow crater. When the dust settled and the groaning of stressed metal finally ceased, Kale took stock of their situation. The ship was intact, but severely damaged. External sensors reported a harsh environment outside. Thin, unbreathable atmosphere, temperatures well below freezing, no signs of liquid water or vegetation. "Well," he said with forced lightness, "it's not the lunar resorts, but it'll have to do." Lyra managed a weak smile, the first genuine one he'd seen from her. She was exhausted, the glow of her skin dim but steady. "Ship status?" Kale asked the AI. "Hull integrity at 62%. Life support functional, but limited to main cabin. And the offline communication systems damaged. Emergency beacon active but operating at reduced power. Estimated repair time, with available resources, indeterminate." "So we're stranded," Kale summarized bluntly. "Any chance of rescue?" "Emergency beacon range, severely limited due to damage. Probability of signal reaching populated systems, less than 8%. Kale sighed, leaning back in a chair and running a hand through his dust-covered hair. "Not the best odds I've ever faced, but not the worst either." He turned to Lyra, who was watching him with those deep, now surprisingly expressive eyes. "I don't suppose your people have any ships passing through this sector regularly?" She shook her head slowly. "My people? Gone. Long before I was left." "Gone? You mean they abandoned the station?" "No." The sadness in her voice was profound. "Gone from this space. This time, the humans came after, found our technology, used it, used me." Understanding dawned on Kale's face. The Lumina weren't partners with humans in building Ethelberg. They were an ancient civilization humans discovered and exploited. He shook his head in disgust. "And they found you perhaps in some kind of stasis and decided to use you as a component in their energy harvesting system." Lyra nodded, her expression both confirming his words and conveying the depth of loneliness this knowledge had brought her. She was not just the last of her kind on the station. She might well be the last of her kind anywhere. Suddenly, Kale's own isolation as a solitary salvager seemed trivial by comparison. "Well," he said after a moment, reaching across to gently squeeze her hand, "looks like we've got some time on our hands. While we wait for either rescue or repairs, maybe you can teach me more about your language, and I'll help you practice standard." "Deal." The faintest smile touched Lyra's lips again, and she squeezed his hand in return. "Deal." Over the following days, as they worked to repair what they could of the ship and conserve their limited resources, Lyra's strength gradually returned. Her speech became more fluid, though still measured and thoughtful, and the light from her skin grew steadier and warmer in hue. She told Kale more about her people, a civilization that had mastered energy manipulation and cosmic navigation long before humans had even reached their own moon. The Lumina had not died out, but had moved on, transcending physical form to exist as energy beings in another dimension or perhaps another universe entirely. Lyra had been left behind, not by accident, but by choice. A researcher who had chosen to remain in physical form to study the transition's effects over long periods. She had placed herself in stasis, only to be awakened centuries later by human explorers who saw her abilities as a resource to be exploited rather than a wonder to be respected. Kale, in turn, shared more of his own story. His difficult childhood on Callisto, his time in the military, the disillusionment that had led him to cut ties with civilization and seek his fortune in the dangerous but lucrative salvage trade. He had been alone for so long that Lyra's presence, initially disruptive, had become a comfort he hadn't known he needed. 2 weeks after their crash landing, as they sat outside the ship watching the gas giant rise majestically over the moon's barren horizon, the AI interrupted with an unexpected announcement. Signal detected. Origin. Unregistered vessel approaching lunar orbit. Kale was immediately alert. Friendly? Hostile? Salvager or rescue? Unknown. Configuration does not match any registered human vessel class. Kale and Lyra exchanged glances. Could be another salvager with a modified ship, he said cautiously. Or it could be something else entirely. Lyra stood, her eyes fixed on the sky. The patterns of light across her skin were shifting rapidly, almost excited. Not human, she said with quiet certainty. And not hostile. You can tell that from here? She nodded. Energy signature. Familiar. Old, but remembered. Kale watched her face, reading the complex emotions there. Hope, uncertainty, a fragile wonder. Your people, he asked softly. Perhaps. Or descendants. Travelers who remembered us. She turned to him, her eyes bright with both joy and sorrow. They heard. Heard what? The disruption. When I overloaded Nexus. The energy ripple. Like a beacon. Kale understood then. The massive energy discharge from Ethelberg's destruction hadn't just been a destructive event. It had been a signal, perhaps unintentional, but powerful enough to reach whatever remained of Lyra's kind, or those who knew of them. As they watched, a point of light appeared in the sky, growing larger as it descended toward them. Unlike any ship Kale had ever seen, it seemed almost alive, its hull shifting and flowing like liquid metal infused with the same starlight patterns that adorned Lyra's skin. Vessel entering low orbit, the AI reported. Scanning. Unusual energy readings consistent with. Analysis incomplete. No hostile actions detected. Lyra stepped away from the ship, moving to stand alone on the barren ground. Her face lifted toward the approaching vessel, the light from her skin brightening to match its glow. She looked back at Kale, a complex mix of emotions on her face. They've come, she said simply. Kale felt a strange hollowness in his chest, relief that rescue had arrived, but also a sudden, sharp sense of impending loss. For you, he said. It wasn't a question. Lyra nodded, then moved back to stand beside him. I can go with them. Back to stars. To what remains of my people's journey. That's good, Kale said, trying to keep his voice neutral. That's what you want, right? Not to be alone anymore. Lyra studied his face with those deep, knowing eyes. You saved me, she said softly. From darkness. From silence. From forgetting who I was. She reached out, her luminescent hand touching his scarred cheek gently. But you are alone too. The alien ship was now hovering above them, a soft light emanating from its underside, beautiful and otherworldly. No visible hatches or docking mechanisms were evident. It waited, patient and silent. They will take us both, Lyra said suddenly. If you wish. Kale stared at her in surprise. Me? Go with you? Too. Whatever's out there. She nodded. A choice. Stay here. Wait for human rescue. Salvage career. Isolation. Her eyes searched his. Or come. See stars differently. Learn what I know. Not be alone. Kale looked back at the rusty bolt. His home for years. The only constant in a life defined by transience and solitude. Then he looked at Lyra, at the light that seemed to have grown stronger in her since they had escaped Ethelberg together, at the unexpected connection that had formed between them. Will I ever be able to come back? He asked. Perhaps. Paths between stars. Complex, but possible. Kale took a deep breath, looking around at the bare moon, then up at the waiting ship, then finally back to Lyra. In her eyes, he saw something he'd been searching for without knowing it. Not just companionship, but purpose, wonder, the promise of something beyond the endless cycle of survival and profit that had defined his existence. "Well," he said, a slow smile spreading across his face, "I've always wanted to see what's beyond the frontier." Lyra's answering smile was radiant, the light from her skin brightening in response. She took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his, warm and solid and real. "Together, then," she said, as the light from the ship enveloped them. Lifting them gently from the moon's surface, Cale felt a moment of vertigo followed by a strange clarity. He was leaving behind everything he had known, embarking on a journey that defied his understanding of the universe. And yet, as he held tight to Lyra's hand, he felt not fear, but anticipation. The rusty bolt grew smaller below them, a testament to his old life, while ahead lay mysteries he couldn't begin to imagine. But he wouldn't face them alone. Neither of them would ever be alone again. The ship rose higher, accelerating toward the stars, carrying with it two beings who had found each other in the silence of an abandoned station. A human soldier and an alien girl, both once lost, now traveling together into a future as vast and bright as the cosmos itself.